to the Oak Park Working Moms Facebook group, Village Trustee Candidate Forum. This particular Facebook group has about 3,500 local moms in the group, many of whom have expressed their interest in this forum and this information but couldn't make it tonight, which is why we're recording it. As you likely already know, there are 3 seats currently open on the 6-person village board, each of them a 4-year term. The village board works with the village president, Anan Abu Taleb, and village manager, Kara Pavlicek, to handle the day-to-day business of running our village. The questions our candidates will be answering this evening come from the members of Oak Park Working Moms and our sister page, the Oak Park Progressive Women's Group. As you might expect, these questions will reflect what working women find important in Oak Park today and for the future. The format tonight will work like this. And let me introduce our people here on behalf of Oak Park Working Moms. This is Petia Kostadinova, who is the founder of this Facebook group. This is Jackewicz. She's going to be moderating this evening. She's got a fair amount of experience in that. And myself, I'm Barbara Dolan, and all 3 of us are admins on this group. The format tonight is going to work like this. Kim will ask each candidate each question. They will have 1 minute to respond. After each candidate has answered the question, we'll go back through and they'll have a 30-second opportunity for a rebuttal, which you don't necessarily need to use. The candidates will get a 10-second warning. Petia is watching a timer so that we can keep things moving. We're going to get started tonight with the candidates introducing themselves and their platform. But before they do that, we're going to have just a little fun to break the ice and hopefully see a little bit of their personality. Who remembers Mad Libs? Or the game Cards Against Humanity? I have given each candidate 16 Cards Against Humanity answer cards, the G-rated ones, and I've asked them to complete 6 sentences as part of their bio as they introduce themselves. This is what they're going to tell us. I believe we could all use more blank in our lives. I'm not entirely sure what blank is all about. On weekends, I enjoy blank. I am definitely against blank. I'm practically an expert at blank, and I feel very strongly about blank. So these are things we'd want to know about them anyway, right? So we might as well have a little fun with it. We'll be starting alphabetically. So, Dino, Andrews, why don't you start us off? You can begin with your fun bio, and then you'll have about 4 more minutes to give us the real deal.
Okay, thank you. So, as the icebreaker, I just want to preface this. You don't think that I'm serious. I believe we could all use more prancing in our lives. That is actually true. I'm not entirely sure what wearing glasses and sounding smart is all about. On weekends, I enjoy free ice cream. I'm definitely against children on leashes. I'm practically an expert, and this is true, on really cool hats.
Nice.
And I feel very strongly about changing a person's mind with logic and facts.
All right.
All right, on a more serious side, I'm Dino Andrews. I'm a 45-year resident of Oak Park, and I own Felony Frank's Restaurants on North Avenue. There we hire ex-offenders and help them get a second chance in life. I'm a former commissioner of the Board of Health here in Oak Park, and I currently sit on the boards of the Rescue Foundation, the Sugar Beet Schoolhouse, and the Suburban Unity Alliance, as well as the North Avenue District. I'm running for trustee because I see Oak Park changing very quickly. Runaway taxes threaten the very ideals of diversity, affordable living, and a sense of community that we've worked for decades and so hard to create in this village. And as a business owner in town, I'm tired of seeing tax dollars pouring into certain districts while other districts are plagued with vacancies and closures. As a trustee, I'll work for the entire village. I would also like Oak Park to be a national leader in all forms of diversity and inclusion. And finally, I'll bring a level of fiduciary responsibility to the village to ensure that good families stop getting priced out of Oak Park. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Peter Barber, and I'm running for trustee. I will do the game first. So I believe we could all use more finger painting in our lives, because I think that would be a good thing to do. I'm not entirely sure what getting married, having a few kids, buying some stuff, retiring to Florida, and dying is all about. Because you really should enjoy what you can now. Let's not look for that to be a big thing. On weekends, and this is close to true, I enjoy being a middle-aged man on roller skates. Only not roller skates, biking. I actually am quite an avid biker. Any nice weekend, I'm either riding around the village or riding far out. I am definitely against a disappointing salad, because everyone should be. I'm practically an expert at Batman, because if we're going to get into secrets, I'm kind of a DC Comics, Avengers, all that stuff. That's my little secret thing. And I feel very strongly about a crazy little thing called love, because I actually do love my wife very much. She's the executive director at the Oak Park Ed Foundation, and I love my two daughters, who are 23 and 19, and the older one is now off the payroll and paying her own bills, which is fantastic. I'm running for re-election as a village trustee. I'm an 18-year Oak Parker. Let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I grew up in Evanston, Illinois. I often hear people compare Evanston to Oak Park, and as a resident of both, I can tell you there's no comparison. Because I think in Oak Park we have really a true sense of diversity, where people live next to people who are different from them. When we moved to Oak Park, there was a black couple on one side, a white couple on the other, and a gay couple 3 houses down, and an interracial couple about 6 houses the other way. That's what we moved here for, because I'm black, my wife is white, and we had 2 interracial kids. And we didn't want our family to be like the only family like ours in any town. And so that was what attracted us, and I think it's what attracted a lot of you and probably a lot of other people that come to Oak Park. And I think it's important for us to try and create a village that maintains that kind of diversity. That's one of the reasons I was really excited that we had the Welcoming Village Ordinance passed a couple weeks ago, because I think it really reflected what Oak Park is all about. And I think that's important for us to keep going. Professionally, I work in marketing. I work for a marketing agency called Lip and Hearn. We do marketing for nonprofit organizations exclusively. So a lot of colleges, foundations, museums. The new Smithsonian Museum that just opened up, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, we did all the fundraising communications for that. So that's the kind of work that I do. I first got involved when we moved here, actually through the kids' school. I got involved with the PTO at By School, became the co-vice president for special events, which is a lot of fun. Led me to be the run for school board and be on the school board for 8 years. One of the things I'm particularly proud of there, I actually ran on trying to get full-day kindergarten in Oak Park. When we moved here, we did not have that. And thank you. I'm quite proud that in my 4th year, we were actually able to bring that to life. And I think it has changed a lot of kids' lives. I'm also still very, very involved with the Collaboration for Early Childhood, which is another way to try and influence kids' lives. But after being on the school board for 8 years, decided to try and sign up something different and moved over to the village board. And I'm very proud of the kind of work that we've been doing in the village board right now. Oak Park is still very vibrant. There's a lot of good development going on. There's a lot of things that we've been able to do in terms of working with the state, in terms of plans for the Eisenhower and keeping that in the ditch. Working on things like trying to expedite repaving of alleys and streets so that we can have a better community there. So I'm very proud of some of the things we're doing, but I know there's still a lot more work to be done. So that's why I'm looking to run for another term. And looking forward to hearing your questions and talking more about it. Thank you.
Oh, I get my mic.
You too. Oh, and by the way, happy International Women's Day. I meant to say that.
Hi everybody, I'm Simone Boutet. I'm running for village trustee. My silliness for the evening is that, not so silly, some of my answers really kind of rocket, okay? So happy International Women's Day. I believe we could all use more strong female characters in our lives. I'm not entirely sure what a bag of magic beans is all about. On weekends, I naturally enjoy frolicking. I'm definitely against hot cheese. I'm practically an expert at tribes of warrior women. And I feel very strongly, and this is very true, I feel very strongly about active listening. So let me introduce myself for real. Again, I'm Simone Boutet. Some of you may know me because I was the former village attorney and assistant village attorney for about 14 and a half years. I'm a 25-year resident of Oak Park. I've lived in an apartment, I've lived in a condo, and I've lived in a home for 11 years. I am also on the board of Housing Forward, and I'm also a volunteer attorney with the Pro Bono Network, which is another amazing group of predominantly women, but also men, who volunteer legal services in the Chicagoland area. So I'm running to over every other part of my platform, I'm running because I want to see increased citizen engagement at the board level. I want to make sure that people's voices are heard and that they're allowed to participate and engage in government. And that to me has a lot to do with transparency, how we get information to the citizens, and how we ask them to have their voice heard at the board table. I think there's a lot of room for improvement in that area, and to me it's a significant component of democracy that we hear from you. I am also running because I don't want to see more high-rises in downtown Oak Park. I moved to this village, again, 25 years ago from the city of Chicago, and one of the reasons that I moved out of the city was because I wanted to have more green space. I was a gardener, I am a gardener, I had a cat, whatever, wanted to go outside. So I decided to move to Oak Park because I figured it was the right, excuse me, there's a bug, that it was the right place for me because of its values. Because when you want to move out of the city, but you don't want to lose the city values, but you want a little bit more green space, where do you go? Well, I came here because 1, we have diversity, 2, we have amazing architecture, 3, we have amazing, smart, and interesting, engaged people, which goes back to what I said before about using those resources for the village. We have an amazing tree canopy, which is another big thing. I'm a tree lover. And we have walkability, and we have the right balance of urban-suburban in our town right now. So those are the reasons that brought me to Oak Park, and those are reasons that I think that we're damaging each and one of those when we put up high-rises that are out of scale, that disrespect our architectural history, that evidently make it difficult for seniors to walk down that block, that impact the trees of Austin Gardens, and that aren't and especially because the issue of high-rises is so universally opposed in this village, and that voice needs to be heard. So many times you hear small groups of people opposed, that's one thing, but when you hear universal opposition to something or near universal opposition, that's something that should really be thought of at the board table. The other thing I'm running for is I do want to see that we as a village collaborate with all the other governmental bodies to come up with a way to manage taxes. We have an obligation to our constituents, which is you, the citizens, that each of us share regardless of what board we sit on. And when you hear that people continually move out of town because the taxes are too high, that to me, that's a crisis. And what you see with that crisis is that that's causing increases in enrollment in the school, which necessitates more money for the school. So that's going to keep cycling and spiraling, creating a spiral. To me, that's the essence of a crisis. The way we can solve that is not to promise to lower taxes, because we have obligations that continue to increase, but to manage taxes and to cut out the things that may not be as important. So we need to decide what's the priority for our community. What are the things that we must spend money on, and what are the things that we can do without? And in that way, that's the only way we can really address the uncoordinated spending in Oak Park. And finally, a lot of people talk about development and other things as to what we're doing to increase our tax base. I think we need to look at the data. We have those developments, some developments that have been around for quite a long time, like the White Co building and what we call the RSC building, which is where Fitness Formula is. And we gave them incentives, and we brought them in 10 seconds. We need to use the data from those developments to see whether, in fact, how those are financially impacting the village. I'm getting hooked, so I'll pass the microphone. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you to all of the candidates running for office. This is a very good process and very good for the Village of Oak Park. My name is Glenn Brewer. I am running for re-election to the office of Village Trustee. I will start with my funny introduction as part of what we're assigned to do, and tell you that these really are the cards that I was dealt. First, let me also say Happy International Women's Day, although in my household it's Women's Day every day because I'm the only male among 3 daughters and a beautiful wife. So nothing new in my household. All right, here we go. I believe we could use more sunshine and rainbows in our lives. I dare you to argue with that. I am not entirely sure what a time travel paradox is all about, despite having watched every episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Next Generations, Star Trek Voyager. You get the picture that I should know, but I don't. On weekends, I enjoy me time, and me time usually involves a golf course. Somewhere. I am definitely against stormtroopers. This actually was in here. Okay. I'm practically an expert at exactly what you'd expect. And that's the G-rated. And I feel very strongly about vigorous jazz hands. Everyone should have jazz hands every now and then. You need them. A little bit about myself. I grew up on the other side of the cul-de-sacs along Austin Boulevard. I grew up in Austin. And the reason I point that out is because I am glad that ultimately there were people in Oak Park who decided not to let those physical barriers be actual barriers to people wanting to move and live in Oak Park. But I took those lessons of exclusion and I've worked in areas of inclusion my entire adult life, the bulk of my life. I started a good part of my career, I've worked at a fair housing agency in Chicago. This agency, Leadership Council for Metropolitan Local Communities, was actually founded as a result of Dr. King's visit when he came here and talked about fair and open housing in the Chicagoland community. Some of the farthest work I've done in my life was at that agency, where we fought on a constant basis for fair and open housing. After leaving there, I took a job with the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC, where in my position, and I'm currently at the FDIC, in my position, I fight for economic inclusion on a daily basis. I work with banks and community organizations to make sure that people have fair access to financial services, credit, banking services. So a big part of my reason for running for re-election is to make sure that we maintain diversity and affordability in Oak Park. We have a lot of development going on in Oak Park. And as a result of some of that development has helped us maintain and will help us afford open housing and affordable housing. We have probably toward the end of this year, we will have nearly $1 million in our affordable housing fund as a result of the developments that are coming. I look forward to the opportunity to try and determine where we will use that $1 million to keep this village affordable. I have a number of ideas of where we can use it. I also am running because I believe that 4 years ago, this village looked a lot different than it does now. There were a lot of things going on, and there's been a lot of improvement in the time since I last ran. And I'm looking to continue some of the good work that I and the board we're working with now have done. Thank you.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. I'm Dan Maroney, and thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. That means a lot that you want to be engaged in your community. The answers to my questions, I believe we could all use more science in our lives. That's pretty true, actually. I'm not entirely sure what spectacular abs are all about. That is also fairly true. Abs. On weekends, I enjoy emotions. Why not? I'm definitely against becoming a blueberry. I'm practically an expert at pole. And I feel very strongly about a balanced breakfast. So, nothing too hilarious. But, at any rate, on a more serious note, I am a lifelong Oak Parker. I am raising my family here with my wife Amy. I have a 6th grade son Ryan and Julian and a 3rd grade daughter Grace. I I have made my adult life working in Oak Park. I've kind of a small-time developer. Most recently, I completed a building in Forest Park on their Madison Street between Duck Fat and Scrine Shops, right across the street from the Starbucks at Elgin. Running for trustee has been something I've wanted to do for, I'd say probably 10 years. Right now is kind of what I call the intersection of opportunity, availability, and preparedness for this endeavor. I'm ready to dive headfirst into being a trustee, and it's rooted in just a love for Oak Park. Growing up here, just the values of Oak Park have become part of who I am. I love this town, and we have such an engaged population that has such strong opinions about things. We have the audacity to put a Second Amendment question on our ballot in the last November election, and I think that's great. Environmental sustainability, integration, small businesses, citizen involvement in government. These are all things that, it makes Oak Park home, and it makes me want to be a trustee that puts these values as the guidance of village policy. We have a great comprehensive plan in our town. It was created about 2 years ago, and sometimes when I look at the comprehensive plan and I see the vision of Oak Park outlined, it's a place where I want to live in the future, and I think you need a dedicated commitment to these things. And sometimes when I look at the action of the past 4 years and the comprehensive plan, I see a disconnect, and I think we need to dig in and really recommit to our values. The tax burden is also of great concern to me. I think there's opportunities for fiscal responsibility. There's great opportunity for more meaningful governmental collaboration. There's a forum called iGov, and I think the intent of that organization is a very worthy intent, but it's kind of gotten a little bit away from that. And if you were to read the Wednesday Journal today, I have a great article in there about specific ideas that iGov can do to really create more meaningful collaboration. And then the last topic is growth. That's the other what we could do to bring more new revenue into this community. And this is something that I feel I'm very uniquely qualified to bring an alternative voice to the table. As I mentioned, I am a small-time developer, and I worry about the way growth is done in this community at the current time. I like to say that highest and best use, maximum return on investment, and a concentration of development in downtown is really what's guiding development in this community. And I really feel that development should be guided by community needs and community values. I think there's great opportunity for development throughout all of Oak Park. I believe that a smaller approach to development could yield great results. I'm impacted by my own building on Madison Street. I know that small development can be profitable. I know that small development can revitalize existing business districts. Oak Park has 12 business districts, and we really need to concentrate on all those business districts. And I really feel my voice as a developer could help take that pendulum of development that has gone very far to one side and just tweak it back to the center a little bit. And I think diversity of thought on the Development Corporation, on the Village Board is really needed, and I look forward to bringing that to the Village Board.
All right, hi everybody. My name's Kim Jackewicz. I'm going to be moderating the forum tonight. I'm actually a short-time resident of Oak Park, in that I've only lived here for 6 months, but I was active in the community where I lived in Chicago, and I've moderated these kind of forums before, so Barbara wrangled me into doing it. So we're going to start with Dino, and for each question we're going to move down one. So Dino will start with question 1, Peter will do question 2, etc., etc., etc. Yes?
Sorry to interrupt you. You just turned off your mic.
I did?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's gonna mess up the recording or something, so I want you to have it.
Are we doing live? This is Facebook Live.
Is it on now?
It is.
Thank you. I don't know if it'll mess up the recording or not. Thank you for pointing that out. So everybody will have a minute to respond to each question, and once we go through all 5 candidates, everybody will have another 30 seconds to either offer a rebuttal to something another candidate said, or to offer up any thoughts that may have come up in the process of the other candidates answering questions. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with Dino. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing the Village of Oak Park, and what would you do to help solve it?
I think the biggest challenge facing Oak Park right now is the increased cost of living. Crane's article not long ago saying that rents in Oak Park are going to rise by 30%. I think that the runaway tax situation that we have right now, increased cost of living, is the single biggest threat to diversity in our village. And when I say diversity, I don't mean just racial diversity, I mean age diversity, socioeconomic diversity. And people are getting priced out of this town. And I've lived here for, like I said, 45 years. And it used to be a town that a middle-class working family could afford to live in. And in another 10 years, if the trend continues, this will not be this way in Oak Park. The collective tax levies since 1999 have grown at a rate of 250% compared to inflation. Now, of course, some costs go, above that, but at this rate, in another 5 to 10 years, Oak Park will be absolutely unaffordable for most people. And I think that's the number one reason I'm running and one of the biggest issues that we need to tackle. Thank you.
I am going to kind of do a two-parter on this because I think they're related. I think taxes absolutely are one of the biggest issues, and I think one of the other issues kind of related to that is diversity, because I think you can't continue to do both. And as Gino kind of said, diversity really isn't just about racial diversity, it is age diversity, it's every kind of diversity you can think of. We've got to find a balance, because on the one hand, as a sitting trustee, the comment I hear most often is the taxes are too high, what are we going to be able to do about it? And that's a very fair question. I too think I got my tax bill and didn't like it very much myself. But at the same time, when we talk about services and we talk about what we do want great schools, we do want great parks, we do want all these wonderful things, and then we do continue to kind of pass referendums and do that. And it's going to be, it's a balance. It really is a challenge because we want these great services, but we also know they all cost money. So I think at some point we're going to have a bigger conversation as a community in terms of what are we really willing to do without. And that's going to be quite the challenge, but I think it's a conversation we're going to have to have.
Well, it's kind of clear, I think everybody would agree, just what these two gentlemen also said, taxes are clearly the biggest issue in our community. What I'm experiencing when I go out on the street and I talk to citizens is a lot of people telling me, well, I would love to vote for you, but I'm moving. And it's a lot of people who are my age or older, people whose children are out of the school system. So what's happening is you see that's resulting in young families moving in, seniors moving out. It's a loss of community, people who've invested their whole lives in our village and are feeling that they can't afford to stay here anymore. And it's also resulting in the need for the school referendum because you actually have an increase in enrollment in the schools due to the fact that people are moving out instead of staying in their homes. So we do have something, that's what I described earlier as a spiral, a situation that's out of control. I also believe the way to do that is to make tough choices, to use the iGov format to prioritize what we need to focus on for the community.
Thank you. I believe I'll tackle the question in a little bit different way. The biggest challenge facing Oak Park is affordability. What can we do to maintain affordability in Oak Park? How can we keep Oak Park affordable? Well, the first thing we really have to do to keep Oak Park affordable is understanding one simple question relative to taxes. What is it that we're willing to pay for? What is it that we want? What is it that we are willing to support? Are we willing to support good schools? What does that cost? Are we willing to support safety, public safety? Because a big portion of the village's budget goes into public safety. And so we have to ask the hard questions. If we do not want those things, what do we replace them with and what do we give up?
Yeah, so the main reason, or the biggest reason that caused me to run was the question for myself. I want to live in Oak Park when I get older, and I want my kids to live in Oak Park with me. So I do agree that the rising tax base is one of the biggest challenges for Oak Park. It does threaten generational, economic, racial diversity. It threatens our small businesses. It's increasingly difficult for small businesses to remain profitable as the real estate taxes go up. It's harder for landlords to provide affordable housing with the rising tax base, and it affects home affordability. I think the biggest opportunity, as I alluded to before, is intergovernmental cooperation. I think the taxing bodies need to be willing to take input from the other taxing bodies and think outside the silo. If TIFs are robbing the schools of money and causing schools to go to referendum, I, as a village trustee, want to hear from the schools about how damaging those TIFs are. Same thing with salaries and other expenditures. So that's it.
Should I wait for?
Okay.
Okay. Just in rebuttal, both Peter and Glenn mentioned that we need to decide what we're going to cut to, be able to pay for stuff. We've had 3 TIF districts in Oak Park in the last 30 years that have taken $200 million off the tax rolls. During that time, $100 million would have gone to the schools, and the other $100 million would have gone to the other taxing bodies. I would argue that the TIFs have no demonstrable return on investment at this point. We don't know if they work, and we don't know if they don't work. We certainly see that there's development happening, but I'm not convinced that the return on investment was there. So I would like to see TIFs taken out of the control of the village board and mandate that if a TIF is proposed, that it goes to referendum for citizens to decide if taking that money out of the tax rolls is worth it as a community investment.
Well, I think as most of the folks when you're talking about TIFs, the TIFs that exist in Oak Park are all lapsing. One is already done, the other one's expiring in the next 1 to 2 years, and there's no plans to do anymore. So I don't think that's really an issue anymore. One of the things I meant to talk about, though, in terms of one way to help control taxes really has been development, and I will be careful to say smart development. Because I think right now we've got enough development in downtown, and we are looking to try and spread it. We're focusing right now on Madison Street, trying to do something at the properties that we own on Madison and Oak Park, in order closer to Madison and home. And that is one way to help mitigate the rising taxes, because something like the Vantage Oak Park Village just opened up. That should be bringing in a little over $1 million a year in tax revenue, property tax revenue, plus sales tax once the restaurant is open up there. So we need to be smart about it, not go crazy with it, because I think we don't want to have too many high-rise buildings. But we do need to look at that as an option. It's smart development's the way to go.
I don't really have a rebuttal to what anybody is saying, except for I would not recommend, when we're talking about what we prioritize, it is paying the rent, as I call it, to pay for your police, your schools, and your essential public works. There are many areas that we can cut spending, and we can do that with ourselves as a village board, not installing bluestone, for example, not hiring consultants to do 2 different plans for Madison Street, instead, which we did. We hired an engineering company at the cost of in excess of $300,000 each to do 2 different plans for Madison. So there's plenty of ways that we can cut spending without cutting into our core priorities.
As has been mentioned, the TIFs are expiring. One has expired and the other 2 are expiring within the next year or 2. When those TIFs expires, each of the school districts will receive a significant payment from the TIFs. They've already received significant payments from the TIF districts. It is going to be up to each of the school districts to actually determine whether they want to receive the payment because they are tax capped, so they will have to make a decision about that. I think it's interesting that some of the things that have been mentioned, like the comprehensive plan and iGov, actually were started since I've been on the board.
I don't have any rebuttal per se. I just think as we talk about development, I think it's very important to always realize that I always say development is a mixed bag. In addition to the pluses, there's also the minus. What is the impact on the schools? What is the impact on traffic? What is the impact of sense of space? What is the impact of discord in the community that it causes? So I'm definitely, I am a developer. I see the need for growth. 70% in 2000, 70% of the taxes that were collected came from homeowners. That's grown to over 80%. So we absolutely do need more revenue, but I just always think as you consider developmental decisions, you have to consider the pros and the cons.
Okay, the next question we will start with Peter.
One of the big concerns we see amongst moms in our group is that the village is becoming less diverse due to rising home prices and tax burdens. We hear a lot of families in our group planning on leaving Oak Park once their children are done with the schools because of this. And as we all know, that will just perpetuate the cycle of the problems we're having with funding in our schools. So what are some things that you think the village can do to combat what we call family flight and encourage parents and single people and people who are not using the schools to come to Oak Park and stay in Oak Park and choose to make it their home?
Well, I think a couple things. One, regarding diversity, while I am concerned about some of the possibilities of change, we're actually, in some ways, becoming more diverse. One of the things that was comforting to see, I believe since the 2010 census, we've actually seen an uptick in seniors, which is good. That was a real concern of mine when I actually started coming on board in terms of, are we chasing out seniors, as people have said, and that's not necessarily happening. I think a lot of the change in terms of parents, and this is one of the things we should better understand, absolutely, part of it is because of taxes and people feeling that. Also, part of it is because people don't need the homes that they have. In terms of, so I've got a 4-bedroom home and my daughters have moved away. At some point, we're going to need to get out of that house because we just don't need that space. So I think we need to be careful there in terms of not everyone leaving is because of that. That said, there's absolutely more we can do to try and encourage families to stay. And I think one of the things we can do is try to make Oak Park the vibrant community that it is becoming. We're actually becoming a restaurant destination. We're becoming a shopping destination. I think those are the things people want from a town like ours. And if you got more reasons to stay, that'll do it. I think in the past, maybe they didn't have as many incentives to really stay because there frankly wasn't that much to do when your kids are out of school. So hopefully that'll be an improvement, and I think we're already starting to see it with some of the growth we've got.
So the question is actually a main part of my platform because I've seen it and I've heard it so much out on the street. I have heard from people, many people, who say that they're leaving Oak Park because they can't afford the taxes. When I was growing up, I grew up in Highland Park actually, and my parents had our home for 40 years, even after we moved out. People invested their lives, their emotions, their sense of place in their homes, and they want to stay there. And when they get old, you know your neighbors, you know your neighborhood. It's, to me, a very important part of community that we keep people in their homes as long as they want to. As we get older, and as our generation gets older, we have an influx of seniors. You know, the gray tsunami, as they call it, of baby boomers. We are going to have to address the needs of people who are older. And their one big issue is that they stay aging in place. Aging in place is very important to a lot of people because relationships are one of the most important things that make for quality of life when you're a senior. So the question is very important to me. I addressed it in my introduction. I do believe that we have a significant problem with taxing people out of Oak Park.
I think one of the major ways we can maintain diversity is to take a good look at our housing stock. Several years ago, the village conducted a survey to determine what type of housing we need. And in order to determine that type of housing, once we did the survey, we said, one of the things we realized is that we need housing for seniors, housing that will be less space for folks to maintain so that they don't necessarily have to leave town. It is difficult to maintain a 4-bedroom home after you get a certain age, and you want to be able to move to other housing that may be smaller and takes less to take care of. So in doing that, we are actually looking at trying to make sure that when we have the opportunity to support affordable housing and support developers who will build affordable housing, we do that.
I said earlier that I believe that values and community needs should drive development, and I think that's very apparent in the downtown district. We're adding 800 small luxury apartments, and 250 more are now being proposed. I would argue that we have reached a saturation point for small luxury apartments, and I don't understand why we continue to recruit this type of housing. I I see a dramatic need for people who can no longer afford the tax burden or just altogether reject $20,000 tax bills, and affluent people who want to stay in the community but on a smaller scale. So I think we need to recruit development that speaks to that need for post-house housing. There's small business districts and land in Southtown at 1000 Lake Street, up and down Madison Street, where we could recruit smaller scale developers that could provide a type of housing that is actually needed.
I don't believe that the answer to affordable housing is to expect people to leave their houses. I come from a culture of people that live in a house for 50, 60, 70, 80 years. My grandfather built a house in Oak Park in 1952. I had aunts, uncles, a sister, mother, grandparents, great-grandparents who all lived in Oak Park. I'm the last one in my family to be here. And everybody has left the village because they can no longer afford to live here. You know, I came from basically a working middle class family. I think that the village has a fiduciary responsibility to keep taxes under wrap. Everybody in town knows that this runaway tax situation is pricing people out. And I don't think that apartments is the answer, because apartments doesn't allow anybody to build equity. And it also creates a transient population, meaning people come into town, they come out of town. At Felony Frank's, at my restaurant, I regularly see people that I went to kindergarten with, people I've known for 40 years that have lived in town. That community will dwindle if we continue at this rate. And so I really believe that we need to get our expenses under control and get taxing entities to work together in order to curb this trend.
Back to your question in terms of what can we do with families, I think another thing we can do with families is try and get them more engaged. I think a lot of times families do get very involved with the schools, which is great. It's the natural entree point. They're really, really more engaged with the village and with some of the other folks. And I think there's opportunities there to kind of give them more of a voice. Haven't cracked the code on that, and I think we need to do that. Because I know when we're talking at village board meetings, it's rare that we can actually see a bunch of parents who have young children who are actually engaged at that level. So I think that's one thing we can do too, is trying to better listen and encourage more of that conversation too.
Yeah, I don't have a rebuttal to this. I think because it was just restating what I said before. There are ways that we can decrease spending at the village board level, and there's certainly the solution in my mind is that we go and do the intergovernmental collaboration, creating a prioritization of what to spend money on, and that those are tough choices. And not everything we are going to be able to do is going to be to max it out. So what I'd like to call it is not buying a Cadillac, but buying a Honda Accord.
The village receives about $30 million of the annual $180 million assessment. Of that $30 million, $5 million goes to police salaries and pensions, $5 million to fire and salary and pensions, and $5 million to debt service. $15 million runs Village Hall. This is a small portion, about 1/6 of the annual assessment of taxes every year. I'm not certain that the runaway taxes is actually runaway taxes. They are actually the taxes that support the services, the education that we have decided is important in this village.
Just gonna pass on any rebuttal.
Okay, no, that's fine.
My rebuttal to the rebuttal is, again, 30 years ago, we implemented TIF districts that have taken $200 million and siphoned it out of the tax rolls. I would ask anybody to say that, if we look at the costs that are going up and all this, what shape would the schools be in and what shape would the village be in financially? And would we have to continually go to the taxpayers for referenda every few years if there were $200 million more in the tax rolls over the last 30 years? I think that we would be in a much different situation, and I think that we need to consider that moving forward.
Great. This next question, we'll start with Simone. Another concern that we've seen amongst the families in our group is the development downtown. We hear a lot about the high rises and concerns concerns about blocking Austin Gardens, but in general, there's a lot of concerns about both the density downtown and density in other areas, such as the development that's been proposed for Madison Street. How do you see the density in Oak Park? How should we be planning for it? What should we do to balance that out with our identity as a village?
Well, a very important question for me, because what I do see is too much. One of the problems with the high rises is that we're not respecting the architecture that we have. So when you have, think of cities that you love, like Paris and Washington DC. All the height of the buildings is uniform. So there's no transition between the buildings in downtown and then you stick up a 20-story high rise. So there's an architecture problem with that. It's inappropriate for the community. What kind of development I think is that we do need to revitalize Madison Street. We do need to do things like look at the community need. What the development we need is for senior housing, for affordable housing, for, as fellow candidate Maroney said, that we look at the demand in the community, and the demand in the community is for affordable housing alternatives for people. So yes, I do believe that the high rises in downtown is not the correct type of density.
We have done various studies in Oak Park to show what the level of density can be supported by, in particular downtown, but in various neighborhoods within the village. You can find these studies, downtown study, Madison Street study, on the village's website. And I implore you to go look at the studies, and you will see that for the downtown study, we actually have not reached the level of density that our experts have told us we could reach. Will we reach that? Maybe, maybe not. While I cannot comment as a sitting trustee on a specific development, because they do have an application for a variance in front of the village board, I can say that we need to look at all of the facts before saying what isn't or is appropriate for a particular area. In terms of Madison Street, we are currently working on a plan to develop Madison Street because the lots there are not deep enough to support the type of development we'd like to see on Madison.
Yeah, I see the need for density in urban areas, and I know that's a trend. And downtown Oak Park is supposed to be a transit-oriented district. Sometimes I think you need to rely less on studies and more on common sense. We're adding 800 units. We've got 250-plus buildings coming to our downtown, and at a certain point, you just have to say we've achieved the goals of a transit-oriented district. We've achieved the goals of broadening the tax base, and rely less on studies and more on common sense. That yes, 800 new units, 2,500 new residents is going to impact traffic. It is going to impact the schools to a certain degree. At a certain point, you do need to take a deep breath and say, well, let's see what the impact of this very large-scale development is going to be. To say we know is inaccurate because only one building is complete, probably only but less than 100 units are actually occupied. So I think the impact is still yet to be determined.
I'm very pro-development, and I'm very pro-development near transit centers like in downtown, and I would like to commend the board members that sit here. This is the best downtown district I've seen in my entire life in Oak Park. It's vibrant. It used to be absolute like nothingness. So the development that has happened, and I'm very proud of, and I think that great work has been done. With that said, the experts have said that we can deal with more density, but my feeling is why get to the point of maximum density? We invest time and money and thought into creating zoning codes, and those zoning codes are what should guide development. And if we're willing to just grant 100% zoning height variance for buildings, this has the potential to do irreparable harm to our community. And these are decisions that will affect Oak Park for 100+ years. And I just don't feel comfortable going so far above zoning for a building here or there, where if we stay within zoning, charm that I think people love about Oak Park.
As I said before, I think in my mind, I'm happy with where we are for downtown right now, and we need to do what the board's already starting to do, which is starting to move more of the development to other parts of town. We're focusing on Madison Street. Are there going to be giant high-rises there? No, absolutely not. They're definitely going to be more in line with what that community is zoned for and what is really more appropriate for that. And as it relates to families, I think that's important too, because part of it is to get more people in, so we do have the vibrancy and we do have the growing tax base to kind of keep things going. But we also want to give people a chance to come to Oak Park. We do not want to live in a little isolated bubble where no one is really welcomed here other than the folks who've lived here for 40-some years. We do want to have opportunities for other people. And I think one of the reasons the development we have right now is going to be good is because, not in Oak Park, but when you look at the West Loop right now, it's booming. And anyone who wants to live near there is going to pay a lot more to live down or near there than they are in Oak Park. So we think that's a really good opportunity for Oak Park, and we think it's going to help tax base and help kind of make it continue to be a vibrant community.
So just for I don't want Oak Park to look like the west side of Chicago. I'm really happy that we're close to it. We get to have all that urban environment right down the street. There's a model of, there's experts that actually say that we have too much density or that the high rises are actually not appropriate. So you could, as you know, find an expert to say anything. I certainly know that as an attorney. What I'd like to see is development that's livable and includes green spaces also. I think we have to think about all the towns that we love, like Naperville with the Riverwalk. Evanston has a lakefront. The towns that we really love have both buildings and spaces. So the creating spaces is also really important to me. And I think too, with the downtown density issue is we have traffic sometimes backed up all the way to the library to get through the intersection at Harlem. And it's pretty much people that are just avoiding it altogether because you can't get through for the traffic.
I think that one thing that's probably missing that I didn't say is that when we put together any study or we put together a comprehensive plan like Envision Oak Park, part of that plan is actually listening to people to tell us what it is that they believe we need. If you look at the comprehensive plan, or you look at some of the studies, you can see the number of outreach efforts we've made to actually bake common sense into any plan that we put forward. So I would argue and suggest that look again at Envision Oak Park, look again at the downtown studies, and you will see that common sense is there and will tell you that we have some room to grow. Where we decide to grow is the issue for the next board.
I'll just say one thought that I had. One thing I think Oak Park needs to do a better job at moving forward is what ultimately attracts developers to Oak Park is just that, Oak Park. We need to remember that we're 7 miles away from downtown Chicago. We need to remember that we have 3 transit lines coming through town. We need to remember that we're between 2 airports, that we've got an expressway that leads right to Oak Park. We have amazing architecture. So I think it's always most important to remember that developers should want to come to Oak Park. We have attributes that really nowhere else in Chicago has. So we could contribute development to all these great things that we're doing, but ultimately it's Oak Park that's attracting development to this town.
One thing that I ran out of time and I wanted to say is I think that as we do this development moving forward, I can only think of 2 buildings that are architecturally significant that have been built in Oak Park in the last 30 years. One of them is the Errol Kirsch House on the north side, and the other is our library. I would like to see more emphasis put or more pressure put on developers that want to build buildings in Oak Park to create some architectural standards or make buildings that are prettier or more significant so that we can continue our tradition of architectural excellence in Oak Park. And I think that's something very important as we develop Madison Street.
I agree with you there, and I think we're actually attracting some of those developers now. Like the folks who are developing District House, who are award-winning developers from across the country. And I think we're attracting some of those folks now because we have proven that Oak Park is a good place to do business where developers can feel welcome. I do see us, as I said, expanding into Madison Street, and then I actually see us trying to do something on the other ends of town, which are North Avenue and Roosevelt Road. We have started to talk about Roosevelt Road a little bit as a board, but there's a lot of work to be done then. And then, Simone, I just want to be clear. I'm not saying I want the park to look like the West Loop. I'm saying that we're going to have the benefits of that. But I would like to know how you kind of create some of those spaces you're talking about, like in Naperville, because I'm not sure how we're going to get a river or a lakefront or something there.
Obviously we're not, right? But we just have to plan for spaces. We have to plan to create not just a wall of buildings, but we actually have to create spaces. We do have a concept that may or may not fly for the space where the Albion goes, which is in our comprehensive plan, that's called, I think, a dorky name, it's called Founder Square, but it's a public space. When you look at concepts like new urbanism, you see that the developments include spaces for people. One example of that is directly across from the fire station. There's a development there in the Euclid, I don't know the name of it exactly, but if you go up those little steps, you'll see it's housing and there's spaces in there, so that it makes it much more livable than just maximizing with high rises. And lastly, I'd like to agree with Peter on the district house. If anybody wants to know what developments I do like, I think that's a great development. It's appropriate for seniors. It's a cool architectural design. It's sited well, and I think it's going to be a great addition to Oak Park.
All right, we're going to have the next question, or sorry, Glenn's going to start the next question. So we've talked a lot about taxes tonight. The moms in our group want to know what the village board and other taxing bodies can do to keep their actions accountable and transparent. And we would also be interested to hear about any synergies that you see between the taxing bodies that we might be able to use to maybe bring our taxes down.
Well, as has been mentioned several times already by folks here, the iGov committee, we've done a lot of work through the iGov committee. And iGov is chartered with the idea that it will look for common areas and common expenses that all of the taxing bodies, the 6 overlay taxing bodies within the village, can work on to actually reduce costs and expenses and thereby keep taxes reasonable. For example, we've swapped buildings between District 97 and the village in order to provide District 97 with the opportunity to build a new headquarters, build a new administrative building that they needed to do. As long as we keep looking for opportunities through iGov to actually work more cooperatively together, I think we will do a lot of good work for households in the village.
With iGov specifically, I really do think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I've been to a few of the past iGov forums and seen all the minutes, and frankly, just the bar needs to be raised on what they're doing. A really hard look needs to be looked at annual operating expenses collectively amongst taxing bodies. It should be a badge of pride to be as close to inflation as humanly possible. We have a village manager who has a salary that is increased, over $50,000 in the past 8 years, and that is so far beyond inflation. And we need to look at operating expenses. We need to look at capital improvement projects, and there should be some sort of binding agreement that we can provide input on each other's capital improvement projects. And if the library feels that $40 per square foot bluestone is wasteful when concrete costs $5 a square foot, they should be able to provide input to the village. And referendum questions, those also need input from all the taxing bodies so that we all can look at things from a collective viewpoint rather than from the individual silo of each taxing body.
The first thing on my list about keeping expenses in line is to cut frivolous spending. So I'd like to echo what Dan said. We're doing a streetscaping project in downtown Oak Park, not any of the other business districts, but downtown Oak Park. And we're likely going to spend more than 7 times the amount of money for sidewalks than we need to. That's frivolous, and it's inequitable, because all the other business districts in town are going to look one way, and then downtown Oak Park looks another way. I don't agree with that. The next thing is joint projects. Here's a quick story. In 1989, I graduated Oak Park River Forest High School. The pools were old and leaking then, and it was almost 30 years ago. At the same time, Ridgeland Commons was a dump, and it was falling apart. Now, logic tells you that if we had entities that worked together in the early 90s, District 200, the Park District, and the village could have worked together to create a campus at the high school with a Ridgeland Commons that was big enough, with maybe 2 pools and one that can be used year-round, with ample parking, which none of the entities have now, and all the sports fields that we need. And this was possible if people just worked together. Instead, District 200 started suing the village, neighbors were suing neighbors, and this is something that has to end. And as we develop Madison Street, we have to make sure that these districts work together.
So I think there's more that the village can do in terms of transparency. I think in general it's there, but I think we also have a very engaged community that wants to know everything right away. And I think that's always hard, but at the same time I think there's more we can do. I think a couple of the comments that have been made about IGOV are true. And I think IGOV has been good to the point that it's gotten a conversation going. Because if I were to go to any of your houses and say, hey, you need to change your budgets and do this, you'd say, get out of my house. But I think there's at least now a lot more respect and mutual understanding about excuse me, what the different priorities are, what some of the challenges are for each of these groups. And I agree that it's time to kind of take IGOV up to the next level and get more of the leadership from the different governing bodies engaged so there can be a little bit more coordination. I'm personally proud of some of the work I was able to do when I was on the school board. We did, for a while, it looked like we were going to actually have the schools and the parks get together to kind of create their own headquarters, and it didn't work out. As Glenn pointed out, the village and District 97 have worked out in terms of things, so it can happen. And I think there's a little bit more we can do to make it happen on a bigger and broader scale.
So I heard a 2-part question. I already spoke about IGOV, we've all spoken about IGOV, and that is the answer to the second part. But what's really important to me is the first part of the question. How am I going to be accountable and transparent? That is a very important part of democracy to me. I think we have significant transparency problems. Somebody asked me a question out on the campaign trail about the garbage contract. They said, what's the last time we bid out waste management? So I went to the village's website and I put waste management in the search term. It took me an hour to try to find the right meeting where that was. I had to upload, download, click, download over and over again trying to find the answer to that question. Citizens who care about their government should be able to find information in an instant. You should be able to find what the meetings are for the Plan Commission without having to dig through multiple clicks on the website. As for my accountability, I want you to have my phone number, 312-403-1048. You can call me, you can ask me why I voted for a certain thing, you can discuss what you think about it with me at any time. I also want to make sure that I have a list of accomplishments and how have I achieved those accomplishments once I have a different website when I'm a trustee. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of quick points on the rebuttal. I'm not sure how the village manager's salary has gone up that much over 8 years since she's been village manager less than 4 years. As for Lake Street streetscape, no decisions have been made, so we haven't spent a dime on Lake Street as of yet. In fact, one of the things I would like to suggest we do for staff is to go back and say to staff, here is the amount we actually want to spend. What can we do for that amount? And as it relates to transparency, of course we all believe in transparency. We make sure that information is available to you and you can reach any of us. I can tell you the number of emails I've gotten over various issues, votes I've responded to better than 80 to 90% of those emails.
To be clear, the village manager position has been around for over 40 years, and that's what I was referencing. The other thing is, money definitely has been spent on the Bluestone. I was at a presentation, and an engineer was showing me the specific drawings for this Bluestone, and it definitely is being worked on at the staff level. And if I were a trustee, I would certainly say, let's put a stop to this. There's nothing in our budget for $40 per square foot Bluestone. Let's move to a different product.
I would agree with Dan. You know, Bluestone has already been placed in downtown Oak Park. It's been placed on Marion Street, and I don't think it looks that much better than concrete. So the precedent has been set, and I believe that if there wasn't such public pressure against that sort of spending going on right now, citizens sort of voicing outrage. I just don't think that it's equitable. And that's I would just be reiterating something I already said if I speak any further on it. Thank you.
I think this conversation, excuse me, is a good example of some of the things we have to kind of do differently. Because Bluestone or not Bluestone is really, in the grand scheme of things, irrelevant. What we have to talk about is what are we going to do on big things to try and make a difference. Paving any one street, and I'm not to say that we should be throwing away money on Bluestone or anything else, but what's important is how do we find bigger ways to collaborate on the big things, like school expansion, like what is going to happen with the next parks. What are we going to do when we have to redo all of Madison Street, because it is time to repave it. Those are big things, and I think we need to find ways to work collaboratively with the other governing bodies to try and address some of those so they don't have a big impact on our pocketbooks.
I have no rebuttal.
Short and sweet, I like it. Okay, Dan, we're going to move on to you. We're going to change the focus a little from taxes and development and some of the things that we've heard you guys talk about for the last hour. So Oak Park is surrounded by a group of diverse communities. What are some things that you think the village can do to be a good neighbor to the communities around us and build bridges to the people in those communities?
I think our relationship with Austin is the biggest one that comes to mind when you pose that question. When I think about that, I often think that we have a lot of old problems that need new solutions, and I think there's organizations in town that are really paving the way for new approaches. Suburban Unity Alliance, the Community Foundation, the Community of Congregations are all really creating new approaches to really have equitable relationships with Oak Park and Austin. And I think the village needs to be a partner with those organizations and make sure that they have the tools that they need to fulfill their missions. I also think there's huge opportunity for the village to invest in the east side of Oak Park. I think the perception of that east of Ridgeland and west of Ridgeland are somehow different is extremely damaging to the community, and I think it needs to be a very proactive effort by the village to address that perception.
This question really is close to my heart. I do a lot of work in putting ex-offenders to work. Many of them live in Austin. I believe that we haven't been a great neighbor to Austin for a very long time. And I believe that the proliferation of cul-de-sac on Austin have made it very difficult for us to get out and for people in Austin to get in. And I also see a giant trade deficit. I mean, I see people coming in from Austin to spend money in Oak Park all day, every day, and I very rarely ever see Oak Parkers going into Austin to spend any money. And that trade deficit creates animosity, and that trade deficit, has money pouring into Oak Park, and that money is pouring out of Austin. So I think as citizens, we need to start looking at Austin as a commercial center and supporting the businesses there in order to be a good neighbor. And I also think that we need to rethink our, in my opinion, building walls using a cul-de-sac to keep people in and keep other people out.
I think the village has done a lot in terms of trying to be a good neighbor, and particularly when it comes to policing. You probably don't know this, but our police force works very, very closely, particularly with Austin, but also with Berwyn, to try and make sure that things are safe and that we're trying to do things the right way. I want to build on one of the things Dino said. I think one of the things that we don't always realize that many of the people shopping in Oak Park are from Austin, as well as from Forest Park and Berwyn. When we were actually looking at Madison Street and trying to figure out what are the right kinds of businesses to try and attract there, we realized on a study that we had done, it actually showed us, and I can't remember the percent, but a huge percent of current shoppers and likely shoppers to come there are not Oak Parkers. So part of the thing became, what are going to be some of the businesses that really kind of attract and serve those communities? Because while we can't go in and fix an Austin or fix a Berwyn, we can certainly make sure that those folks are welcome when they come to our town. And if they're going to shop here, they're going to get their needs met because they're contributing to our tax base. Another thing I wanted to bring up real quickly is we are doing more and more with biking to try and make some of the connections there. We've been doing more and more road work and things. So there already is some good partnerships in place. They can absolutely grow, but there are some partnerships already in place.
So I actually agree with what Trustee Barbara said. I think we're doing some really good things now. I think certainly the police collaboration is essential. I think we also have the community of congregations, as Dan suggested. We have Westside Bridge, Westside Men, Westside Women, different organizations that are going across the border and creating relationships. So to me, it's the most important thing is that we create relationships. But I want to share something. I participated in a forum that the Housing Center started, and I participated in the subgroup, as did Dan, on the Austin neighborhood. And Deborah Graham was there, and Deborah Graham brought up a point and said, Austin doesn't want Oak Park to come in and fix it. Austin is a community that's proud of itself, that they have their own community, their own values, and it's presumptuous for us to assume that we should go in and fix it. I think we've done our good things. We have grocery stores where they don't have grocery stores. We provide grocery options for them. We allow them to come to the farm. We have our farmers market that has a lot of people coming and shopping at the farmers market. So I think that we are doing good things, and I'm hoping that those things continue.
I grew up in Austin. I still have family in Austin. My father lives in Austin. My sister lives in Austin. There is a lot more that we can do in Austin. We've done some good things, and we've got some good organizations that are working to bridge the gap in Austin. But I agree with something Simone just said. We can't go in and fix Austin. We can't go in being the all-knowing, all-seeing entity and fix Austin. I do agree with Dina. There is a trade deficit in Austin. And the city of Chicago also realizes that there is a need for more economic development in Austin. That's why they have designated Chicago Avenue as a business zone so that they can, in fact, put more money into the Austin community. So there are many other ways we can actually bridge the gap with Austin, but we have to consider the folks that live there and ask them what is it that they need from us.
I don't know if the comments were directed at me about fixing Austin. I certainly don't think that we can fix Austin. My comments were specifically related to being a good neighbor to Austin. And now, just in the last couple of years since I've been working in Felony Franks, have I tried to spend more money in Austin, support Austin businesses, and build bridges, not only through organizations, but personal relationships with new friends in Austin and new organizations. And so I totally agree with the comments that we can't go into a community and fix it, but we can certainly go in and support the efforts of that community, go to events there. There's many arts events that happen at Austin Town Hall, and there's like great businesses in Austin that I think that we should be frequenting.
Rebuttal?
If you'd like.
My only comment in rebuttal is that as a trustee, I want to make sure that I don't talk just because I'm given an opportunity to talk, that I only say what I really want to say. So I'm going to pass.
That was not you.
Glenn, do you have anything else? Or?
What she said in fewer words.
Way to show her out. Okay, so we're going to go back to Dino, and we would like to know what you think differentiates you from the other candidates in the race.
Well, there's a lot, and there's a little. First, I'd like to say that I respect each of the candidates. Whether I get elected to a seat or not, I have a great deal of respect for every candidate at the table here, and I would feel very well represented with any of them being on the board. With that said, I ran a very large consulting company for 9 years. Before that, I worked in biotechnology for 3 years. And I'm also very engaged in nonprofits and social issues. So I think that I bring a really good balance between understanding what our cultural needs are, what our societal needs are, and what our business needs are. I like to think that I bring a very solid business perspective to the village board. I've also lived here, so I know our history. Everybody knows our history here, but I think it's important to build a community moving forward that also respects the community that we've had in the past, and making sure that our growth is so much controlled, but understood. And lastly, and I don't know about any of the colleagues, but I certainly do not put ketchup on my hot dogs. And I think that that is something very important that you should ask every candidate.
I'm a no ketchup person. It's a really good question. I think I'm unique in a lot of ways, and I think I'm the same in a lot of ways. I'm going to echo what Dina said. I think all 5 of us are very qualified, and I think all 5 of us would make good trustees. So I don't think you can go wrong. I'd still like to be the one who's doing it. Some of the things that I think I do bring to the table, though, one, I do have experience in a couple of different boards now, having been on the village board as well as in the school board, so I definitely have a good understanding of how boards work. Some of the things that I learned my first few years as a school board trustee were that it takes a board to take action. Any one person on their own is not going to do anything. But how do you actually get other folks to kind of see what you're trying to do, convince them of the wisdom of that, and get them to move forward? I think I've become pretty good at that. Another thing that is, I think, pretty unique to me, and I will leverage some of my own personal background. Growing up in a poor neighborhood in Evanston, being in an interracial relationship, and then always kind of admiring what Oak Park was, I want to do everything I can to keep Oak Park the way it is, in the sense that this trusting community that really is reflective of a diverse kind of, all sorts of diversity here at Oak Park, that really makes Oak Park what it is. And that's, I think, the biggest priority to me. Yes, we have lots of other decisions to make, but how do we keep that in mind?
So what distinguishes me from the other candidates is that I have 14 and a half years experience working for the village and a 26-year career in municipal law and government. So I have some, basically this area has been my career my whole entire life. Also, I can't miss the opportunity on International Women's Day. You can't blame me for saying that I am the only woman that's running. That obviously distinguishes me. But mostly what distinguishes me, I think the most, is that I have a real commitment to people and to relationship building. I'm excited that not everybody's answering the question the right way. I'm excited to see people with diverse skill sets on the board. And regardless of who gets elected, I want to have relationships with those people, to use their expertise, to use my expertise, and to also reach out into the community, because I really like building new relationships and hearing from people, and that's something I really hope to bring to the board.
I also believe that you won't go wrong with any of the 5 up here. They're all very qualified people. I am also an attorney. I have practiced law, fair housing law. I have practiced family law. I've also invested in a business in Oak Park, Kinslager, celebrating 1-year anniversary this Saturday. Please feel free to stop by from 11 to 12 midnight. But I think one of the things that sets me apart from everyone else is an innate quality that I have, and that I've managed to hone that quality over years, and especially being on the board. I'm a good listener. You cannot do this job as a trustee without being a good listener. And you have to be able to listen to a number of different voices. It's true. 10 Oak Parkers in a room yield 12 opinions. And you have to decide which one is the opinion that's best for everybody else outside the room.
I definitely think what sets me apart is my development background. Oak Park has gone from an era where there was almost no development, and it's gone to an era right now where every key decision maker in how development is done in Oak Park just uses that highest and best use and that maximum return on investment. And I really think my background and the approach that I bring to development could help bring that more towards the center. There really does need to be diversity of thought in the development corporation. There needs, and the other thing that I'd say is, I'm on the Historic Preservation Commission, and I joined the commission just to give rights to, or give a voice to homeowners, to understand, to talk about the balance between historic preservation and property rights, the balance between historic preservation and economic development. And I disagree with the other people on the commission all the time. And we fight at our meetings, and we disagree, but we end up being friends at the end. And I think that's really needed at the board table as well. So I would want to bring that.
trustee, and should I get elected, I would be very accessible, and I would be a prolific user of social media to spread information and news above and beyond what we've seen in the village so far.
Here's the thing I'll add to mine is I definitely am looking always at the long term. I don't want short-term solutions. They're easy to come up with, but that's not necessarily going to be the best solution. So I'm always looking at what's going to be best for us in the long haul. And I think that sometimes it's easy to kind of react to an angry constituent here or whatever's going on in the Wednesday Journal there. It's important to listen to those things and have them influence how you're looking at the long view, but you've also got to look at what is the long view, what is the best thing for this village. And I think I'm really, really good at that. It's not always easy because, you know, there, as Glenn pointed out, there are about 12 opinions for every 10 Oak Parkers here. And so you need to listen to that, but you also have to figure out how does it fit into the broader context of where we're trying to go. And I think I'm pretty good at doing that.
I'll just add one other thing, is that I care a lot about aesthetics. I think it's important that we make sure that Oak Park stays very attractive. I've seen a couple places that I think we really need to spruce up a little bit. So I think that it makes a safer and a much more livable community when we have a focus on aesthetics.
I got 30 more seconds. I'll just say, what I always say is that the issues that people are most concerned about in Oak Park is generally what's in their backyard. And I'm proud to say, not only did I grow up here, but I've lived at 708 Marion, 1212 Woodbine, 1163 Lyman, 941 Winona, 641 Lombard, 1101 Edmer. I own 3 apartment buildings and I've rehabbed well over 20 houses. So I do have a perspective of the different neighborhoods of Oak Park that is unparalleled.
Okay, we're going to go to Peter. So we represent a group of working moms, and you know, oftentimes working moms feel like they are scrambling to keep things together. With the rise of more and more families where both parents are working, you know, we have to do a lot of work to keep our families going. What are some ways that you think the village can help support working families going forward?
There's probably way more than I'm going to come up with here, but probably way more than I'm going to come up with here, but let me do my best. I think one of the things we can do is first off, listen to some of those working moms more. I don't think we've made it easy to do that. One of the things that I had talked about before in another forum was how do we actually try and engage working moms in the conversation? If you're a working mom, you want to come to a village board meeting, it's not too easy. We're not really accessible to having 3- and 4-year-olds playing around outside. So I think that's one of the things that we could do right there, just to kind of make it a little bit easier for working moms to actually be a part of it. Providing some kind of childcare. I know some of the PTOs do that through the middle schools, and I'm sure we can do that if there's some interest in something like that. I think some of the other things we can do is just, as we're looking at different policies, we do tend to look at them from an overall resident, what a resident's looking for. I don't think we always look at it from the different varied lenses of what's a working mom feel like, what's a single dad feel like, and I think that might be a smart thing for us to do a little bit more often as we're looking at some of these policies to make sure we're better reflecting that. But the key is always asking, listening, are we doing what we should be doing for working moms?
I have a couple things. First of all, I would like, I'm not a mom, believe it or not, I'm a stepmom, but one of the things that I do, as I mentioned before, is that I participate in the Pro Bono Network. The Pro Bono Network has a huge number of people in it, and what that's told me is that there's a lot of people in Oak Park who are very highly educated, who are having a hard time balancing their work life, so that they're just volunteering. A lot of the women in the Pro Bono Network left work to raise their family, and now they're trying to get back in. One of the barriers to that has to do with employment in and near the village. I would like to see, if possible, that we attract an employer to the village. Someplace for educated women to get really good jobs that isn't that far away. Because the commuting distance, even when you don't have kids, 2 people working in a household, someone's got to be able to run home and get the plumber. So I think the other thing we can do is a creative idea to have more part-time jobs, potentially even at the village. Good quality jobs where people can share jobs or have part-time work so that they can manage their family. I'm out of time, but I got that 30 seconds coming afterwards.
I think some of the things that we've already begun and already have done, I was one of the original trustees who helped negotiate the collaborative for early childhood. And And so that is making sure that from very early ages, based on information and research, we have a system of reaching working moms with young children who need assistance in making sure that those children get health care, get reading and educational materials, and get those things to them. One of the other things the village board passed recently that we worked on was actually allowing home-based businesses, a different type of home-based business, where if you are a baker and you bake cookies, you can do your home-based business and allow that in your home. One of the things I'm also proud of last night, and I'll talk about that in 30 seconds.
One thing I think a lot about is it's imperative for the Village of Oak Park to engage its residents. We have slightly over 50,000 residents, but we don't have a lot of assets that other communities like Oak Brook has a shopping center, Rosemont has convention centers. We just have our people, so I think it's really important to engage the people, and little things like sending out welcome packages to new residents that kind of inform opportunities that are available in the community. We have, again, going back to the 800 units coming online, there's a big need to engage those residents and let them know about what is going on in the community. I think our website, too often it's just, oh, it's on the website. We need to point people to the proper pages of the website to learn about the village. How about a transparency page on the website that just has all the information right there of what a village resident would need to know to be informed about the village. FOIA requests, why not put those and make those public, at least what was asked for, just so people are better informed. How do you publicize openings on commissions, tweets, and email blasts when there are commission openings? Any measure to engage residents, I think, is a good effort.
I agree with pretty much everything everybody said. To add to that, I think one of the things that we're facing is that families are spending less and less time together, especially families that have two working parents or one working parent. So I think the best thing that we can do to help is to create really great, engaging spaces for family activities. I also think that we need to have a lot more cultural activities throughout town that are very easily accessible and promoted, so that even on short notice, almost every weekend or every night of the week, there could be something for families to do. And the third is something that's starting to happen, and that's creating eating spaces. There's certainly a proliferation of restaurants throughout town, which I think is really good. Coming from the Greek culture, I find that eating a meal is one of the most engaging and fun things to do with the family. And sometimes it would probably be really nice to have that meal out instead of having to, clean up at home afterwards. And finally, the last thing is keeping costs down. I think in families where you have two working parents, getting priced out of town is something that's on a lot of people's minds. And so, again, going back to something I said earlier about a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we keep this village affordable and use that long-term planning as a way to be able to make that happen.
I have no rebuttal, so I'm going to continue the extra 30 seconds.
I'm sorry. My other points were, we have to have a little bit more flexibility in funding. It's true, what Glenn said, it's nice that we have this home-based bakery or kitchen business that we approved. But we also had a situation a while ago where a daycare center wanted to come in across the street from Fort Hills that we were really inflexible about, and we told them no. It would have been a perfect spot for a daycare for moms to drop off their kids, get right on the public transportation, and go to work. And we were so inflexible about that that we wound up saying no to them and winding up with a very similar child-oriented business in that space. So I think we need to be thinking about the moms and convenience for moms when we make those types of decisions.
Just real quickly, in terms of, I'm glad you mentioned welcome packages, because actually the Community Relations Department budget was increased to cover welcome packages. So there will be welcome packages given to new residents, and they can actually receive hard copy or electronic version of the welcome package through the Community Relations Department of the village. The other thing I wanted to talk about real quickly was that Monday night, we actually passed that a small business loan pool that will help support home-based businesses. That loan pool will amount to about $3 million, and I think that will help support those who want to work from home.
Good? Okay. Good? Okay. Okay. We'll go to Simone. So we've seen a lot of similar themes running through tonight: taxes, development, schools, things like that. What is one goal that you would have for your term as trustee that we haven't talked about yet tonight?
A huge goal of mine is to increase transparency. I know I did touch upon that, but that's a huge goal of mine. I think we've talked about the website, issues with the website. I think we need to increase the time that we put out the agenda. We need to increase the availability of information on the website. And then a second issue, I could go on and on because I have multiple ways I think we can and should, and I know how we can increase transparency. But another thing I want is to see database decision making. I want to see that when we do give incentives to developers, which aren't necessarily bad, but we show the community, and it is a transparency issue, that those are providing a return on investment. We have data. We should be learning and looking at it. It's just smart business decision making, and that data should be shown to the public so they see that if we're making investments that do or don't pay the community back, and that to me is just informed decision making.
Repeat the question, please.
What is one goal that you would have for your term that we haven't talked about tonight?
I think I touched on it a little bit earlier. By late 2017, early 2018, we will have approximately $1 million in an affordable housing fund. I want to determine how we use that fund. I want to suggest various programs we can use that fund in order to incentivize greater investment in the community. One of the two ways that I thought about is, first, if we can think about for younger couples or younger people who want to come in, young families, is a down payment assistance fund. A number of municipalities have down payment assistance fund. We can devote some of that fund to a down payment assistance. The other way also is to incentivize affordable housing developers. And Dan probably knows this well. When trying to build affordable housing, you actually can't run into a bank generally and get $20, $30 million. You have different layers of financing that you need in order to be able to develop affordable housing. I'd like to see the village be able to step up and help fill the gap for affordable housing developers.
One thing that I'm really excited about is raising the bar in sustainability for the village. Over 2 years ago, we eliminated sustainability manager, and there hasn't been a suitable replacement for the sustainability manager to this point. One thing that's exciting about green energy for me is most of it is the technology, and the price of technology goes down over time. We're seeing it with solar energy. Solar is now cheaper than coal. Ridgeland Commons just had solar panels installed that did not cost the Park District a dime. I think there's opportunities for large-scale solar projects with other municipalities. I think there's opportunity for solar with the rebuild of Ike. We have 2 miles of sun-filled stretch of Eisenhower that is great space for solar. There's very good environmental minds in our community that we can tap into their knowledge. I'd love to revisit the tree planting policy. I am alarmed at the loss of our urban forest, and I'm alarmed at how small some of the trees we plant are. So I'd love to revisit that, the policy on that.
My biggest goal going into hopefully being a trustee is what I like to call diversity 2.0, and that is equity. On paper, Oak Park is incredibly diverse, and I lived through the 70s and 80s and saw the direct result of the work that we've done in the village in the 60s and 70s. And then I feel like we've rested on our laurels for 20 years or so. And so one thing that I would like to see is that our events in town look a lot more like our diversity looks on paper. So I go to Day in Our Village every single year. I go to Oktoberfest. I go to concerts in the park. And And what alarms me is that it doesn't look like the Oak Park that I see on paper, and this is a major problem. And there are still groups of people, and not just racial groups, but also socioeconomic groups, that do not feel a sense of belonging at the same level that I do in Oak Park. And this is something that I think that we as a village need to tackle, and I think that we need to tackle it very quickly.
So I've got two actually. My current one I hope to complete, which is trying to fix parking in Oak Park. And that's one of the reasons I was really happy when we got into this comprehensive parking review that I initiated with the village board. It's one of the major complaints that anybody who has a car and people who don't have cars have here. We've addressed it on a piecemeal basis. The process is already in place and we should have it done by the end of the year. So I'd love to be continuing on the board so I can see that through. The other one is actually similar to what Dino's talking about. Oak Park is not diverse by accident. It's diverse because of a lot of decisions and sacrifices, frankly, that a lot of people made back in the 60s and 70s to make this community what it is. And I share some of the concern you have. I think a lot of folks who've come in more recently, and not to say they need a history lesson, but I don't think there's a full appreciation of what it took to get it this way, because it's going to take similar kinds of actions, decisions to keep it this way. And are people really ready and prepared to do that? Are they really ready to put more emphasis on keeping Oak Park diverse in all ways, racially, sexually, agely, everything. Agely? I took it to say. We're going to use agely. Agely.
That's it quickly. So not rebuttal, but more advancement. I totally support what Glenn said. I'm on the Housing Forward Board, and having another affordable housing development in Oak Park, or using that $1 million that we have in the bank, are very important issues to me also. I also support what Dan said. I'm a green person. I compost and all that stuff. I grow my own vegetables. I would have chickens, but my husband wouldn't let me. But I support all of the efforts of people in this community to increase our sustainability. I would like to see that position filled. It's been delayed for too long. But also what I'm hearing too is these vibrancy, right? We all have great ideas, and what I'd like to see is that we go back to a culture where the vibrancy and the creativity of the community is supported, and those ideas trickle up, and we don't just go top down, just do what comes from the top down.
I would like to mention one other thing that I think is important that we should work on. Just this past year, the village board actually voted to enter into a contract with the Chamber of Commerce. We are funding the Chamber of Commerce to the tune of $100,000 for the purpose of supporting the 12 business districts here in Oak Park. I would like to see the business districts grow, develop, and have the type of marketing strategy that downtown Oak Park has, and have the type of vibrancy that will help businesses in those districts stay in those districts and grow in those districts. So I think it was very important that we we funded the Chamber of Commerce so that they could help put together information for each of the districts and actually work with the districts to develop their programs.
Well, it's not really a rebuttal, but it's just another thought that I have. So our president Anand, our mayor Anand, he's done some good things, but one thing I'm looking forward to is I'm looking forward to challenging him a little bit. I think he definitely has an agenda that it's get on board or get out of the way, and he can be a little persuasive, overly persuasive, and I look forward to really challenging Anand, and I think I could do that quite effectively, so I look forward to that.
I believe my colleague. I guess one of the other things that I would like to do is people talk about the transparency issue, and I think there's, as actually Peter said in another forum, he said there's a difference between a problem and an issue. And I think that we have a communication problem that leads people to think that we have a transparency issue, or we have a transparency issue that whatever. The point is, I think that we need to look at the way that we communicate with residents of Oak Park, and one of the biggest goals is to be able to engage people and go back to the citizen commissions. 10 years ago when I was on the Board of Health, our citizen commissions were full of and those people were placed by the CIC. And now, President Anand is very active in placing people in different commissions, and I think that in a form of checks and balances, this would be good to have the CIC be more engaging in actually placing people in those commissions, and us as a village board maybe using the advice of those commissions more so than we have in the last 10 years.
I guess another thing I would like to see, and I guess it is kind of building on that whole communications thing, because I think there's a lot of information out there, but there's absolutely more that can be done to try and do this. It's fantastic when we do have an active campaign, because I think we as candidates get out, community gets out, there's a really rich, robust discussion about the issues going on, and that's fantastic. I think all of us would never feel more informed. Unfortunately, that only happens once every 2 years in terms of really having that kind of significant opportunity. And I don't think it's because trustees aren't willing to go out there, it's just it doesn't really get rallied around. It's hard to get people kind of thinking about it. So I wish there was some way, and I'd like to try and think of some way to kind of find more, not forced, but more ongoing communication with the community in ways like this, so that we can consistently be hearing from you more often, addressing your concerns more often, and not have it just kind of go up because of this issue or that issue, but kind of create more of an opportunity for that to happen all the time.
Okay. I think we have about 10 minutes left, so I think a good way to close would be to give each of the candidates maybe about 2 minutes to wrap things up, make any points that they feel they haven't been able to make, talk about anything they haven't been able to talk about, or just go back and reiterate some of their priorities for their term. Might as well start with Glenn, and we'll just roll through. I think I'm 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm Glenn Brewer, running for re-election for village trustee. Unlike other candidates sometimes, I'm actually not running from my record. I'm actually running on my record. I am proud of the, I'm proud of, I have a loud enough. I'm proud of the accomplishments I've managed to achieve as a member of the village board. Such things as the growth and development. For example, you have Vantage at Lake and Forest. Emerson is near completion, and Lincoln Properties will be breaking ground this spring. The Affordable Housing Fund, as a result of bringing in those developers. The new comprehensive plan in Vision Oak Park, which we adhere to. We are currently undergoing a complete overhaul of the zoning ordinance. We restructured and reinvigorated the Development Corp. The Development Corp actually is now doing the job that we wanted to do. I'm glad that, as Peter mentioned, we started a comprehensive review of parking, and it is my hope that before leaving this board, we will actually solve that maze. I look forward to continuing the current mindset of Village Hall. There is improvement within Village Hall. There is a better sense of getting things done among the village board and Village Hall. And I look forward to engaging people, residents, more, not just in the course of this campaign, but over the course of the next 4 years. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing that I'm most excited about is, again, bringing diversity of thought to not only development in this community, but onto the village board. I think it's very much needed. I hope you take away from me, I'm 100% committed and able to fully commit myself to this job way, way, way beyond just showing up to a meeting every 2 weeks. I'm ready to dive head first and really roll up my sleeves and deal with a lot of the issues that the village faces. Secondly, I hope you see that my development background really can lend a lot to the development discussion. One thing I think I could be really good at is creating meaningful relationships with other municipalities, elected officials, other elected officials from taxing bodies, and my own colleagues to not only collaborate meaningfully, but challenge existing perceptions and ways of thinking. And then finally, just that values of Oak Park will always guide my decision making. I think we're a town of great values, and those values need to be at the forefront of all our decision making.
I think that a vote for me is a vote for equity. I think it's a vote for transparency. I think it's also a vote for availability. I believe in our public servants being available to everybody. I think a couple of the strongest things that I would bring to the board is long-term planning. And, this is a question I ask. I go to other forums and I ask candidates and other boards, like, what will your entity or what will Oak Park look like in 10 years? And I feel like we just don't have long-term plans. And I don't think that it's anyone's fault, but I think that because the taxing bodies don't work together, that there isn't a singular vision for what Oak Park is going to look like 10 years from now. Next, I'm a person who has a history of getting things done. I go by this life saying, and it's Latin. It says "acta non verba." That means action. Actions, not words. And I'm anti-bureaucracy, but I sit in enough boards to know that the community effort does take time and it does take effort. With that said, I believe that our projects take far too long to get done. And I believe that we invest far too much money in experts when we have a lot of expertise that lives in the village already. And finally, I'm a local business person. I'm a product of the Oak Park schools. I went to DePaul University where I earned a business degree with Academic Excellence Award. And I've run large companies and I've run small nonprofits, and I think that if there's one word that you could take away in thinking about me as a candidate, it's balance. I'm a very good listener. I have a very balanced approach that's based on data, it's based on logic, and it's not based on emotions. And there are things that we need to do and tough decisions that need to be made for the entire village, and not everybody's going to be happy all the time. And I think that we're in challenging times right now, and I think that those challenging times take very, very tough people. You can learn a lot more about me on my website, dinoandrews.com, and you can sign up for signs and learn my entire platform, and my cell phone number is published on the homepage. Thank you.
So I want to thank the Working Women's Group for putting this together, and for the Progressive Women's Group for also being a part of it. And again, it's super appropriate that it's on International Women's Day. That's worked out very nicely. I'm Peter Barbara, and I definitely want your support for another term as village trustee. This town is great. It really is great. We've got issues and we've got problems. We have to fix it. But this is a great place to live, and it's certainly still the great place that I moved here for, and I'm pretty sure it's still the great place that you moved here for. And I think too often we lose sight of that sometimes when we're debating about development or parking or anything else. But I think that's the thing we have to keep in mind, that all the different things we're talking about are merely ways of trying to keep Oak Park this great village that it is, and one that can be vibrant and last to the future. Some of the things I want to continue working on, smart development, as I've already said, I think and we're starting to move from downtown. We need to move from downtown. We've already got some plans in place for trying to do something on Madison Street. We also need to start focusing on the other ends of town, because I'm still very concerned about North Avenue, up by Dino's business, where I'm sure you'll agree, lots of opportunities to try and do a little bit more from that part of town. Not only good for the business district there, but also good for the residents there. We don't really have the range of services that many of the rest of us have in the rest of Oak Park to try and walk to. Going the other way, same thing on the south end of town, the Roosevelt Road. Again, the Berwyn side's done pretty well. Our side, not too good. And we've started talking about some things, but we haven't figured out a solution yet, but we have to do that. Again, smart use of the land, smart use for providing more services for our residents down at that end of town, so there's more things that they can get to. Another thing that's important to me is collaboration, trying to work with some of the other governing bodies, not in a heavy-handed way, because as a past school board president, I know that I'm not going to, wouldn't respect some other group coming in and telling me what to do, but we can certainly find ways of working together. And lastly, trying to keep up and find more ways of talking about diversity and making sure people understand what it takes to have a diverse Oak Park, and make sure that people are willing to kind of commit themselves to it as much as I am. So appreciate your vote, Peter Barber. Thank you.
Again, I'm Simone Boutet. I want your vote also. Please, when I first moved here 25 years ago, I moved here because of the values. So many people in our community who aren't raised in the values of Oak Park actually learned about Oak Park and chose to come here because of the values. To me, the most important value of Oak Park is its people. And that's why citizen engagement and transparency are the most important parts. They override every other part of my platform. If you think about the other aspects of my platform, those parts are all in it. The part about tips and making sure that our incentives, whether they're tip or non-tip, business incentives have data to support the return on investment. That's for the citizens. That's so that people can understand where their money is going. I'm a good government candidate. I care about transparency. I care about citizen engagement. One of the best parts about living in this town is how many smart people we have that work in so many different and interesting jobs. And some of those people serve on our boards and commissions. Some of them come to the village board with comments. Some of them call and email. Those are great voices that should be heard. I want to see the vibrancy that we've always had returned. I want to see that the village actually accepts ideas from outside of Village Hall and supports those ideas. Those are from you. Those are the things that I want to hear from you. If you have a good idea, if you have a way that the village can be improved, I want to hear those ideas. Also, I'm not afraid to take a position about the high-rise downtown. I have a lot of people that think that we shouldn't be here advocating for our position or that we shouldn't take a position. I have a position on that. I think that's why you're here, is to learn my position on the issues. And I'm not afraid to say that I think that when the community voice is so strongly against the high-riseification of Oak Park, that's something that we should take seriously into consideration. I have many other concerns with it outside of just the public discord, but I think I agree with so many of the concerns. I'm getting the hook, so I'll just ask you to vote for Simone because I want to earn your trust, and I hope I've earned it tonight. Thank you.
Great, thanks guys. Before we adjourned, we wanted to see if there were any questions from the audience that people would like to pose to our candidates.
And I'm going to jump in real quick. We did promise that we would be done right at 9, and it is 9 o'clock right now. So if you do need to leave, we understand, and now would be the time to do that. I'm just going to speak for the candidates and say you guys could probably hang around another 10-15 minutes if people had questions directly. So we're happy to a little bit more time for more personal questions if you guys would like to do that.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for being
Thank you
here.
guys, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Don't be shy with questions. We actually hold on them.
Yes, go ahead, Megan.
Are we gonna mingle around? I thought we were gonna. Are we just gonna? Okay.
Yeah, we can do it on a more personal level.
That sounds good.
Yeah, mingle.
You can stay there. Stay here.
Okay.
Stay here. It's fine.
I like
My question is primarily for the two incumbents, although after that, if the others would like to respond, that would be great too. I've been talking to local business owners, and one of the conversations I've heard a couple times is from people who've said, oh, I know someone who wanted to do a business in Oak Park, and they ended up finding it difficult and opened it in Berwyn or somewhere else in the area. And specifically, they said, in fact, that Berwyn kind of held their hand through the process and made it very easy to open a business there. And in my day job, I'm an academic. We have this concept of scaffolding for our students, where instead of saying, go write a 20-page paper, we say, Tuesday we're going to work on your thesis statements, then we're going to work on outlines on Thursday, and then we kind of work them through the sequence because they've never, done what we're asking them to do before. So my question for the incumbents is, do you feel like Oak Park does a good job scaffolding for new small businesses? Because it breaks my heart to see them opening a business and then closing within a year. I hate to see that. And it's bad for the village, and it's the hopes and dreams being shattered there is just terrible. So I want to know what we have to support them. Do we have people coming in, maybe 6 months into the business, and consulting and saying, how is it going? Are there things we can tweak to make your business more attractive? So that's sort of my general question, is what do we have in terms of supports? I kind of want to see a guide on the village website, like, so you want to start a small business in Oak Park, and then kind of walk them through what happens.
Yeah, you go.
I think to the first part of your question, in terms of how easy is it to do business in Oak Park, if you're doing business, I'll say it's much better now than it was 4 years ago. I think that was one of the major problems that I saw coming into it, and I think many people would acknowledge, where we had a consistent stream of folks who were talking about just even getting through the zoning process, the permit process was very cumbersome, particularly compared to their experiences in Berwyn or other communities. And that was bad, because not only was someone going through it having that experience, but then we started to get a reputation for that as well, in terms of like, oh, Oak Park's going to be a pain. I don't, Michelle could probably talk about it when she went through it. So one of the things that we did when I came on the board was trying to clarify roles and to try and make it a little bit easier. So the village staff is really much more focused now on trying to provide a smooth, consistent, streamlined process for handling businesses. There have been some changes in personnel, there have been some changes in processes, and the feedback we're now getting, it's nice to actually get little emails from potential business people saying like, I was just talking to the building department, they were so helpful, that's fantastic. That didn't happen my first couple of years on the board. So I think there have been some positive changes on that front. The other thing that was a big part of that was, I think village staff was also trying to do more development work in addition to trying to manage that. So there was more of a separation of, hey, let's have the Oak Park Economic Development Corporation really be the focus for development.
Okay.
Send prospective people interested in starting business to them and let them really kind of coach them and handle them. I don't think there's really as much follow-up as you're talking about, but it definitely is the place that we're kind of sending everyone who's interested in starting a new business in Oak Park to them, where they can have a little bit more personal coaching. They'll actually go out and help them find a location that makes sense for them, help them understand the different zoning issues. It's less about really how to run your business. That really is the business owner's responsibility. But it does help to make it more easy, I guess, to kind of navigate through Oak Park.
I would push back a little on the idea that it's the business owner's responsibility, only because there are businesses in Oak Park, not to name names, where I feel like you could tweak 3 things about it and it would do so much better. And it's one of those, like, why shouldn't the village help that out? Anyway. So.
Just to build on what Peter said, yes, it is easier now working with Village Hall. And one of the major things we did was we restructured Village Hall, and within Village Hall decided that one of the things that we wanted to make sure that happens when a potential business owner comes into Village Hall is that they are provided specific guidance as to all of the processes they have to go through, so that they don't have to guess where to go next. There is a checklist. We don't call the checklist guide, so you want to start a small business in Oak Park, but we probably will soon and very soon. Listing skills. So there is a checklist that we say, if you are opening a particular type of business, you will have to, you'll see fire or police or this or that. And then we make sure that staff helps the business owner get all of the information together that they need, all of the various permits. Their information is provided so they know what permits they will need. So it is much easier, and a lot of the feedback we get now is from business owners who are serial business owners who say, my first experience years ago was not anything similar to what it is now. There can be some improvements, yes, but we're working on that, and we continue to develop it, and it was important that we made sure that when someone comes into Village Hall, that we get them through the process as quickly as possible.
I have the unique position of being a local business owner in Oak Park who has built a business in the last 2 years there, and I respectfully completely disagree with my colleagues. My process was a nightmare. I spent over $15,000 more in rent and utilities, waiting on inspections that took 5 minutes but took 6 weeks to get somebody in to do it. Before I opened Felony Franks, I had the health department, I had the plumbing department, and the building department all come in and make a checklist for me of all the things that I would need to do before I signed the lease. Then I signed the lease, and then I did the build out as according to a plan that was approved. And before we opened, then I had a plumber say, oh no, you need to tear up the floor and do plumbing this way. That was an extra $10,000. More recently, because things may have improved or not, there's a person, an Oak Park family, who bought the building next door to Felony Franks. It's on the corner of North and Roselle. Spent hundreds of thousands of dollars buying the building, and he runs he's a designer to make specialty machines and stuff like that up on the 2nd floor. He was going to put his offices. on the first floor, his wife, a longtime Oak Parker, wanted to put a preschool, which would have been an outstanding addition to that neighborhood. They went to Village Hall, talked to 2 different people. Both people told them 2 different processes, and one person was so rude that it talked him out of making that capital investment in Oak Park. And he will either not do that, or he will take his business elsewhere. This is a travesty. And so I might agree with my colleagues if it was a multi-million-dollar business or a national corporate brand or a big box store moving into a TIF district or into downtown. But for the little guy, it's really hard. And these are 2 stories that are empirical data, and I think it's something that we need to do a much better job. And there is a level of complacency in Village Hall about this process that actually discourages people. And the positive feedback that I think that we have heard in the village, I always remind myself that for every 1 positive feedback, there could be 50 people that aren't saying anything. And I really believe that in this business development that we still have a major problem in Village Hall, and we need to do everything that we can to fix it.
Yes.
I'm gonna say, so my husband opened a business in the last 2 years in Oak Park and would 100% disagree with Andrews. He thought it was amazing how great the village was walking him through. It's lawyer. And they needed a variance. I mean, their use was not allowed in that district. They're the first brewery in Oak Park. They have the first, commercial brewing license in Oak Park. They created a new liquor license for they created a new liquor license category for anyone who wants to do it, but this business brought it about, and the process was lengthy. There were meetings, but they held their hand through it, and it was accomplished, and it was met with great enthusiasm and just very encouraging. They worked with the Economic Development Council on property, looking for properties and all that, and just generally thought, wow, Oak Park has a bad reputation, and we don't know why, because they just felt they were catered to. And everyone's got different stories, everyone's got different experiences, I know that, but
yeah, well,
they were really happy.
Full disclosure, I was not an investor.
No, right, yeah, I didn't.
At the time when that happened. So
this is years,
this was years back when they initially came, and
Glenn, thank you for clarifying that.
no, it's
I was not, because I don't want you to think that I somehow had influenced the
You were not.
process. It was the process
This
they
is
went
before
through.
they had any investors.
Well,
Or any
And then
relations.
later, when I saw their business plan,
I'd like to address the point. Shouldn't every business have that experience?
Sure.
Right, so some do.
I'm just saying, there's a lot of different opinions.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Some businesses do have that experience where they feel like their hand is held. Other businesses don't. And that's an inequitable use of that resource. And I mean, this is a guy, this happened 2 weeks ago. That this guy he felt chased out of town. And this is yeah, I know, but he's an educated guy who lives in Oak Park. He's lived here a long time. And he's not an emotional dude. Like, that was his feeling leaving Village Hall. And so I think that the issue is that there needs to be a singular process that every business goes through, and that every business is treated exactly the same as any other business, whether it's, a brewery or a preschool or a hot dog stand. And I think that we need to do more to create consistency rather than, one great experience and one very negative experience.
So just my quick comments on Marianne's question. One is I have seen what she's talking about on other municipal websites where it's just, this is what you do, step 1, step 2, it's just do exactly what we say and it's done. I think I support that idea. And I had a second point, but I lost it at like 9:01, so. Sorry.
So I'm Michelle Vanderline. I own Sugar Cup Trading. I also just recently, over the last 3 months, opened up a second business on Marion Street. And my experience on both accounts was flawless. So I don't necessarily share that it was hard or challenging opening a business. I think I was pretty much ushered through. So I had a fortunate experience, so I can only say that there are some tweaks that need to happen, and that is, again, I do believe that the directory would be a great checklist for any new business owner. The second, well, really my question for you guys is that when I did open my first business, I was inundated with calls from the Oak Park Development Corp, I guess at that time that's what it's called, with the grants for small businesses, inundated with all of the opportunities, whether we want to redo our storefront or grants for operational costs. So there are a number of different grants that were available for any small business who wanted to open. The second time around, which is 3 months ago, I do go to Development Corp and say, well, what grants are available this time? And I need you to hear what the response was. The response was, there's nothing for you. I said, what do you mean there's nothing for me? I not only ran a successful business for 7 years and proven success, but now because of the success, we're expanding into something differently. He says, well, for bigger developments, we have funding. We don't have those type of grants anymore. And it probably was one of the most disheartening words I ever heard because, again, my impression was that, yes, Oak Park is going after big developments, which in a lot of ways is great. But at the same token, I did not know that was going to be the sacrifice of small businesses. And so you said, Glenn, that you push small businesses over to the Oak Park economic development folks, and that's kind of how that's where to go. But what is the village's and a trustee's responsibility to small business and growing independence? And also, what are you doing to really push or oversight of the Development Corp, making sure that they're recruiting small business independence, that they have funding to support small business independence, and there's follow-up with the business owners. If you have a successful business owner, your goal is to not only to keep them here. The cost of new business is much higher than retaining. But I do feel that I guess I would like to hear more about your commitment as village trustees, not just to big developments, which is important, but what are you doing for independence? And what is your goal towards independence?
There was actually nothing for you before Monday night. There was nothing for you before then because we needed to restructure various grant programs and loans programs. And then we needed to determine a good source and a sustainable source of funding for loan programs. And then Monday night, we passed one of our new provisions, one of our new resolutions, because we are a community that receives community development block grants. HUD has a little known program called Section 108, where they will provide loan guarantees for small business development. We were awarded $3 million for a small business loan pool, and we actually accepted that grant Monday night. So now we have the opportunity to actually support small business development and small business continuation, finding ways to leverage that $3 million into additional dollars by other private investment. We have not yet, because this happened Monday night, we have not yet put together the application process. But if you want to begin to look at what the pool covers, it actually is part of the agenda materials that came out Monday night. I'm very excited about what this money is going to allow us to do in terms of small business development, recruitment, and specifically retention. Because we know when small businesses get into that 2 and 3 year range, that's generally the make or break part of their growth and development. And with the number of businesses that are out of business by 5 years, year 2 and 3 are very important. So I'm completely excited about that pool, what that pool gives us the potential to do, and how we will design using the money in that pool to actually attract other investments for small business.
I'd echo what Glenn just said. I'm really excited about that grant as well, and I hope that we can really do some good things about it. You know, when I look at the business development that's going on around town, I'm really excited about things that are moving into town. My issue with it is that they're moving into failed businesses that aren't selling, they're just closing. And when a business closes, it means that they're not profitable. You know, if a business is profitable, they tend to be able to be sold. So you've got Live Cafe that just moved in. Great place, love it, I go there every day for coffee. I also used to go to Red Hen every day for coffee. They closed. Two brothers signed a letter of intent to move into the old Marion Street Cheese Market. Both of these are businesses that were staples of Oak Park that closed. One had property taxes that doubled over 5 years, and in the Marion Street Cheese Market, the property taxes were $78,000 a year for that little restaurant. And you know, this is unsustainable. So I'm excited about some of the, you know, the things that we can do with grant monies and loan guarantees and stuff like that. But we also have a responsibility to retain the businesses that have made a capital investment in Oak Park and to equitably use monies that, you know, should be used all over town to support all the businesses and not just businesses in TIF districts or in downtown or, you know, it's inequitable. And I think that we can do a lot more to make sure that the entire village is protected rather than just certain areas.
Yeah, I would just like to also comment, yeah, I was aware that we did take away the funding when we redid Oak Park Economic Development Corporation at the beginning of the prior term, 4 years ago essentially. They made a funding choice not to fund those programs, so I'm glad to hear that they're back. I think that we do see a business-friendly focus of the board, but we're seeing it really focused on these big high-rise type developers or big-time corporate developers like Cooper's Hawk or whatever, Target or these, you know. So for me, because of, I consistently say, the people in Oak Park and their creativity, I want to see those small businesses and a return to the vibrancy that's created by the individuals that live in Oak Park that create those small businesses. So I'm happy to hear that that program is going to be refunded. Not refunded, but funded again.
I'm two things. I'm sorry to hear about the guy you were talking about that had that kind of bad experience, and that's really unfortunate. And I'm also sorry that you had some. That isn't the kind of direction I would expect the Oak Park Economic Development to say. I would hope that they would find, even if they're in Grantsville, I would hope that they would find some other ways to try and help you, particularly with an established business where, let's get real, it's not a risk. You're already here. That's a great thing to have current business owners actually doing more in Oak Park. So the one thing I would ask is let the village board know these things, or at least encourage your friend, because the kind of comments we've been hearing, I get the sense that, okay, things are pretty much fixed. Clearly they're not. And I know this may have been the one thing that didn't happen, but it might be indicative that there's a dozen things that didn't happen, and that's bad too. So at least let us know these things so we can try and do it.
And I already.
Yeah, well, I didn't. We can at least put pressure on them.
Exactly.
And just to reiterate, while absolutely the Oak Park Economic Development Corporation has done a lot with some of the major developments, they're not supposed to be ignoring small businesses. They're still supposed to be doing it. And so that's why when I was asking the question originally, I was trying to direct people there because there's someone I just talked to who was interested in trying to open another like brewing tasting room or something. And she's never really done this. So she needs help trying to find what's the right place. How can I afford? What space do I need? She needs even more of a go-to guy than what you're talking about. And I get the sense that they're already helping with that. But if it's not happening consistently, we need to know so we can at least try and fix that.
Yeah. I'll be very brief. But one thing that I remark upon is in 2 years, the village won't own much land anymore. In 2 years, the TIFs will be completed. And if you look at the past 4 years, the main tool that the Development Corporation has used is turning over village-owned land, TIF money, and providing very large-scale zoning variances. So I think the onus will be on the Development Corporation to really prove their worth in impacting development throughout all of our business districts in terms of recruiting new businesses, retaining existing businesses, and filling vacancies. So it's something that I really look forward to pressuring the Development Corporation on.
in a completely different direction. And I don't mean to make this an uncomfortable discussion, especially for the incumbents, but it's another, I think, issue of great concern to people in the community. It's percolating just as much as development and taxes is percolating. And so I wanted to get your opinion about what do you think of the current structure of how we have our Board of Trustees with the village president? Because the person in that role right now has been an outside personality. He's kind of a lightning rod. And do you think our current structure is viable? Or if you have a different opinion, what would that be?
To clarify, do you mean personalities and how the
No, I mean a
people at the
trustee
board
working
team?
with a president of the Board of Trustees versus a mayor, or perhaps some other structure
Yeah,
that you might have in mind or that you know of from other communities.
I'll be very clear. The concept of a mayor getting a six-figure salary is it doesn't fly with me at all. I think Oak Park's form of government in which you have people who aren't really getting compensated a significant amount and are just creating policy and having the village manager actually perform the duties of maybe supervising the staff. There's no change that needs to be made in my eyes.
So what I think you're talking, so a big issue that I have does have to, so the structure of government is what we have, right? You can only change it by referendum. The concept that I think you're talking about is, with the salary and the terminology that, and the size of the personality of the incumbent, that you have a person that's taking too much of the authority. In fact, under the law, the trustees are the ones that have most of the authority. We're the ones that should be setting the goals, and we should be voting on things have more influence. One of the reasons I think it's happening the way it's happening now is because of the fact that you have the village president on the Oak Park Economic Development Corporation as a voting member, negotiating deals privately with developers that are then brought back to the board table. When you have that happen, you have something that's been in the works for almost a year without the contribution of the community or the contribution of the other trustees at the board table. And then by the time it gets there, it's too late. It's the will is so strong, the ball has rolled far enough along that if anybody had anything to say, it would take a lot of personal will to say, stop the press. This has been going on for 2 years, but I'm going to say no to all that work. So to me, that's a structural issue, and it has to do with how the Oak Park Economic Development Corporation should be constituted and how it should be returned. That is actually a staff function, negotiating development deals, just as like you would not have the village president managing the snow plowing contract, right? Or any other function of government. So it's something that should be returned to the staff level, and that all the trustees get the information and participate in the decision making at the same time. To me, that's a good government initiative, having nothing to do with individuals, but that's how the proper form of government returns the authority to the trustees.
What Simone said. But adding on to that, in true parliamentary procedure, the president is supposed to be a neutral tiebreaker. That's it. And I echo what Simone said. Trustees need to be the driving force of the village board. And the president might, manage meetings, might be a neutral tiebreaker. Our form of government works. It's worked here for over 50 years. I think it was either 1952 or 1954 when this style of government was implemented in Oak Park, and it's worked great. But we have to be careful not to let power get consolidated. And I would say that it's happening, and probably not for dubious things. It's happening because people just like to get things done, and sometimes it's easier when there's a consolidation of power. I would like to see our government return to the true form of the village manager style, and that is the trustees set the budget, set policy, and hire a village manager. Essentially, the village manager is like the mayor. We don't have a mayor. We have a president who uses the word synonymously, with mayor. One of my biggest objections to our president being called the mayor is that the rationale for it was, well, other communities have a mayor, and we want to look like that. I can't recall a time in my 45 years in history where I thought Oak Park wanted to be like anybody else. We are the driving force. We are the leaders in so many different things. For us to just adopt a mayor because other people do it, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I also agree with the Oak Park voting members that sit on the village board on the Oak Park Economic Development Corporation. I don't think that it creates a legal or even an ethical conflict of interest, but what it does do is it creates suspicion and confusion. And one of the biggest things that leads to that confusion is if you go on the OPEDC website and you look at the board of directors, some of those people are voting members and others aren't, but it's not disclosed anywhere. So nobody really knows what the structure is, and when you don't know what the structure is, people naturally get suspicious, and when people get suspicious, there becomes distrust. And again, I really don't believe that any of this has happened for any dubious reasons. I just think it's the nature of where we've gone, and it's gotten us where we are, and that is distrust with government. A little. I wouldn't say that we have any major problems, but we could certainly do better with that level of transparency.
First and foremost, let me say that I've always made it very clear to the village president and to my colleagues on the board that I believe in the current form of government that we have. The board, village managers form of government. And until the voters of Oak Park say different, that's the form of government we have. Second thing, let me clear up a little bit of misinformation. OPEDC does not negotiate deals. They provide a forum for those who are interested in opening businesses in Oak Park to open their books, share their financial information with business leaders in the community to determine if that particular business or development would be viable in Oak Park. The staff at Village Hall still negotiates all deals. They are the ones who are responsible for putting together the packages that go to the village board, and it is the village board who then makes a decision as to whether this will go in or that will go in. Every 2 years, we get together as a village board and we set priorities. The trustees drive that process. We set the priorities for the next 2 years. We publish that information because we don't want to be in violation of the Open Meetings Act. Those meetings are all open, and we publish that information so that you can see what the trustees have said for the next 2 years. Here will be the priorities of this board, because we do realize with an election every 2 years, it is possible that the board will be reconstituted. So we make sure that every 2 years we get together, we do that, and the trustees drive that process. And since I've been on the board, the trustees have always driven that process.
And I'd like to address just one thing that Glenn said. I'm sorry. We have 2 village staff that are on the board of OPEDC, isn't that correct? One or 2? Just one?
One voting member, Tammy Grossman's.
So there's 2 members on the board,
Yes.
one voting, one not.
Kara's a voting
Right.
member, Tammy.
This is what leads to the confusion. Why do we have village staff on the board of the OPEDC, one voting, one not, without any designation on the website? If either of those 2 are involved in any negotiations, how do you differentiate the hat that they wear being a village employee and the hat that they wear as a board member of the OPEDC? This confusion is, I think, what fuels a lot of the distrust that's happening right now.
My turn.
Okay.
First, I'm going to answer your question. I firmly, strongly believe in the village manager form of government. Yes, there's been a change in title that Anand likes to use, which was troubling at first, but at the same time, it's sort of whatever. You're basically still a village president. It's still your official title. You are one vote among 7, and that's it. So that's the structure I like. I see no reason to even think about a change to a true mayor organization because A, I don't think we're a big enough community to actually justify something like that. And B, I don't think we as a community would want to have that much power invested in any one person, whether it was Anand or anyone else. So I think this form of government, I think, is perfect for us. The discussion's kind of turned into a little bit more of a discussion about OPEDC, and I wanted to talk a little bit about why I was supportive of it and the form it is. And I am one of the voting members, one of the trustees sitting on it. Anand and I are the 2 trustees who sit on it, along with RJ, the village manager. What was happening before was that everything was so open that many of the developers coming to Oak Park didn't want to even talk to us because it was such an open process. They felt, going to share my information when basically it's going to show up in your Wednesday journal the next day, and all of my competitors are going to know exactly what I'm proposing and can therefore kind of match me and beat me or whatever. I want to have a place where I can talk to you to at least see, is my idea viable for your community? Are you willing to even consider it? And if not, that's fine too. So it provides them a place to share openly their financial information to kind of say, here's what we're trying to do. Does it make sense? To the point Glenn was making, there's no negotiating going on. That is all done by village staff. Yes, Tammy Grossman sits in there so she can understand some of the things that are starting points for it, but it is up to staff to actually decide what's going to happen with all that stuff. Well, they listen to the guidance from EDC for sure, but it's up to them to make those kinds of decisions. And I look at the results. The 4 years prior to me coming on the board, there wasn't much development going on in Oak Park. And that was a different format that we had for the Economic Development Corporation. It was just the Oak Park Development Corporation at the time. It wasn't working. And we weren't getting a whole lot of developers who were wanting to come to Oak Park. We look at now, and yes, we do have good development going on. We have great plans in place. Those have all been talked about. And we're actually starting to now have developers come to Oak Park. This Albion thing, I'm not... The one thing I think is particularly good about it is that someone is coming to Oak Park and saying, hey, I'm considering investing $100 million in the community, what do you think? Whether that's the right or the wrong development, I'm not going to get into, but I think that's good that we're at that point where we're now attracting those kind of folks. Target. People were talking about trying to get a Target in Oak Park, literally my entire 18 years in this community. It was going to be at Oak Park in Madison. It was going to be somewhere on Lake Street. It was going to be over where all these things, and nothing ever happened. We're getting a Target. It's going into the development that was approved and cleared through the Economic Development Corporation. So I'll say that the model right now is working. I can appreciate that it is very different than what has been experienced before, and I think that makes some people uncomfortable, but at the same time, it is working. So I don't see any real need to reason to change it.
I think it's very important to remember macroeconomic trends. We were in an extreme economic downturn nationally between 2006 and 4 years ago. So to give all the credit to the Development Corporation and the actions of the current board, it completely ignores macroeconomic trends. It also ignores, like I said earlier, the attributes of Oak Park. Not to take all the credit away, it's just important to be balanced in what's spurring development that we're seeing now.
I think people tend to think that because we're Oak Park, people are going to automatically just flock here, and it hasn't been happening.
So I would just like to say that the Oak Park Economic Development Corporation, by being outsourced and not part of the village, but containing enough elements of the village to be something in the village, is actually, it's not subject to the Open Meetings Act, it's not subject to the Freedom of Information Act, and there's no way to know what goes on in there. So they don't keep minutes, they don't publish them, nobody knows. So I actually think that we do have a significant issue in the community with trust. I think you've seen there's some significant objection to the Madison Street development, and a lot of it has to do with the process, not necessarily the project, and that we can't get things done in the community if we don't have your trust. So while I appreciate the progress that we've made in the community with some of the things that are happening, I don't think that I'm not willing to trade good government for progress. I think we need both.
All right. It's quite late. Did anybody have a question that they're dying to ask for the whole group before we go? No.
I had an idea, should not be a hard one. But what would you think about? We've been talking about doing a sort of political open mic series, like a monthly event, and having before the open mic, which would be more performative and fun, having some sort of civic cocktails conversation. What about Oak Park committing that a trustee will attend? One trustee will be sent to this once a month to just participate.
So long as I don't have to sing.
You don't have to. It would just be a conversation before the performative part, and you would, like thinking of like dividing the labor. You would only have to each of you would only have to come to 2 a year, so it's not too much of a time suck.
I think mixing politics and cocktails is probably a really great idea. I like the idea. Again, I like to think that citizens and residents know who their representatives are. So anything that increases civic engagement, that gets entities talking to each other, people talking to each other about the, you know, the issues that are going on. I think it would be great for people to be able to, you know, listen to all the perspectives, because I'm not quite sure that all of the neighborhood issues filter their way up to the village board from time to time, so I would just.
All right. Very quickly, I would just like to say thank you for those of you who came. It did obviously run a lot longer than our 9 o'clock meeting.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
To all of you, thanks for being here. We'll have this online. You can tell your friends to find it. I will make sure that you all know where the video is. We're hoping to do more candidate forums. A week from tonight, we want to have the school board members. 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to have the library and village clerk members. Those events would not be recorded, so we need more bodies to participate. So we'll share more information with you at that time. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I remember we met at.
Yeah, you look very familiar.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yes,
right.
yes,
That's
we
right.
met at,
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
It was when I was Steve's house.
Yeah, that's right. So,
Yeah, we actually just visited that back
Oh, sure.
because